A powerful tycoon was handcuffed right in front of an exhausted mother and her 4 children. But what happened next left everyone frozen in shock. Picture this. Chicago, October 2025. The wind off Lake Michigan sliced through the south side streets like a blade that never dulled. A crumbling 3-story building, peeling paint, boarded windows, and in the freezing night, a mother thin to the point of breaking, clutching her 4 children as they trembled from hunger and cold. Then, a pounding on the door, heavy, urgent, merciless, boots slamming against the stairs. The door bursts open. Emily Harper. We have a warrant. You're being evicted. 15 minutes. Take what you can carry. 15 minutes. For a mother to pack the entire life of 5 human beings into a single plastic bag. But that wasn't the cruelest part, because at that exact moment outside, red and blue lights flashing, sirens tearing through the night, and in the freezing street, a powerful man, in handcuffs, Jack Harlan, 44 years old, a man who owned buildings Emily would never dare step inside. An empire of construction, money, power, all of it collapsing in a single metallic click. But what made him freeze wasn't the handcuffs, wasn't the police. It was the eyes of a child, a 7-year-old girl, clutching a worn-out cap, looking at him like she was seeing herself in him. And in that exact moment, something inside Jack Harlan broke. Not power, not money, but a feeling he had buried his entire life. A feeling to protect, to save, to hold those children away from the cold, away from this world. But Emily didn't know that. She only saw a stranger, dangerous, in handcuffs, and all she wanted was to get her children out before things got worse. But she didn't know. That man was about to change her life forever, because what he was about to do would go against the police, against his enemies, and against his own past. It would save a family on the edge of collapse. It would expose a scheme no one saw coming, and it would reveal a truth that would leave everyone breathless. But before I tell you what happens next, I need you to do something. If you believe that, sometimes a stranger is the one who saves you from despair. If you believe that family isn't always the people who share your blood, then hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever lost everything and only had hope left? Because this story will make you question everything you believe about fate and family. Let's begin. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the blank world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. Chicago, October 2025. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through the narrow streets of the South Side like a knife that never dulled. In a crumbling 3-story walk-up with peeling paint and boarded windows, Emily Harper huddled on a thin mattress on the floor. She was 31 years old, bone-thin from months of stretching every dollar, her cheeks hollow, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. Her 4 children slept fitfully around her. 7-year-old Lily, clutching a faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap that had once belonged to her late mother, 8-year-old Tommy, curled beside her like a protective older brother, and the 2 younger ones, 5-year-old Sophie and 3-year-old Noah, pressed close for warmth. The radiator had not worked in weeks. The wind whistled through cracks in the walls, carrying the distant wail of sirens and the smell of damp concrete. Emily had not eaten a full meal in 3 days. Her waitress uniform from the diner hung on a nail stained and threadbare. Tonight, the electricity had been cut again. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling where water stains bloomed like bruises, her mind spinning with the same desperate calculations she made every night. How to feed 4 children tomorrow, how to keep them from being taken by social services, how to survive one more week. The humiliation burned in her chest. Once she had dreams. Now she was simply trying not to break in front of the children who depended on her. A sudden pounding on the door downstairs shattered the fragile silence. Heavy boots on the stairs, voices shouting. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She sat up, her thin frame, trembling dizziness washing over her as she tried to stand. The door to their single room burst open. Two men in dark suits and badges pushed inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Emily Harper, one barked. "We have a warrant. You're being evicted. Failure to pay rent for 6 months. City marshals are here to remove you and the children." Emily's legs nearly gave out. She clutched the doorframe, her voice coming out small, timid, and polite, even in terror. "Please, sir. It's the middle of the night. The children are sleeping. Can we have just until morning? I'll find a way. I always do." The marshal's face remained stone. "Ma'am, the building owner has already called it in. You have 15 minutes to gather what you can carry. Everything else stays." The unfairness of it struck her like a physical blow. She had begged the landlord for an extension, explained about the diner cutting her hours, about Lily's recurring cough from the mold, about Tommy's nightmares after their mother's death. None of it mattered. In this city, the poor were swept aside like yesterday's trash. Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them. She could not let the children see her cry. As the marshals began tagging furniture that was not even worth selling, chaos erupted outside. Sirens screamed closer. Red and blue lights flashed against the cracked windows. Emily peered down the stairwell and froze. In the street below, surrounded by 4 FBI agents, stood a tall, fair-skinned man in an expensive black coat. His name was Jack Harlan, 44 years old, one of the most powerful figures in Chicago's construction and waste management world. His empire was worth more money than most people in this neighborhood would see in 10 lifetimes. He owned entire blocks of gleaming downtown buildings, fleets of trucks, and hidden interests that ran far deeper than anyone outside his circle knew. Yet at this moment he looked anything but invincible. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists with a sharp final sound that carried up the stairwell. Jack's ice-blue eyes lifted and locked onto the chaos in the building. His gaze found Emily and the 4 small figures huddled behind her. Something in his chest twisted violently. Guilt, old and gnawing, surged through him like acid. He had walked these same streets as a boy, poor and angry, before he clawed his way to power through deals that still haunted his nights. He had sworn he would never become the kind of man who let children suffer in the cold. And yet here he was arrested in front of innocents, while his own empire crumbled around him. "Get them out of there," Jack said, his deep voice rough with sudden urgency, directed at the nearest agent. "They're just kids. They don't need to see this." The agent ignored him. Upstairs, Lily's small voice broke. "Mommy, what's happening? Why are the police taking that man?" Emily's hands shook as she tried to gather the few belongings they owned. A plastic bag with clothes, Lily's Cubs cap, Tommy's battered backpack. Her head spun with dizziness. The world tilted. She grabbed the wall to steady herself, pain shooting through her empty stomach. Horror and confusion flooded her. Why was this powerful man looking at them with such raw intensity? Who was he? And why did his eyes seem to carry the weight of the entire world? Jack felt the inner storm intensify. Remorse tore at him. He had spent years building walls of money and power to protect himself from the poverty that once nearly destroyed him. Now those walls were cracking. Seeing this destitute woman and her 4 terrified children stripped bare every justification he had ever told himself. He wanted to rip the handcuffs off to shield them, to make the unfairness stop. A fierce protective instinct surged through him, unlike anything he had felt in years. When his gaze settled on little Lily clutching that faded Cubs cap, something deeper cracked open inside him. An overwhelming surge of love, sudden and intense, flooded his heart. Not romantic, not possessive, pure fatherly, almost violent in its strength. This child reminded him of the boy he had once been. She deserved better. They all did. "Emily," he called out, his voice carrying up the stairs with surprising gentleness for a man in handcuffs. "Take the children and come down. Stay close to me." Emily hesitated, fear and curiosity warring inside her. Her voice came out soft, timid, and polite. "Sir, I don't know you. We're just trying to leave quietly. Please don't make this worse." But the marshals were already pushing her and the children toward the stairs. Tommy glared at the agents with the fierce suspicion only a street-smart 8-year-old could muster. Sophie whimpered. Noah clung to Emily's leg. The wind howled through the open doorway as they stepped into the cold October night. Jack's eyes never left them. The inner conflict raged harder now. Consuming remorse mixed with a powerful resolve. He had rivals closing in, betrayals unfolding within his own organization, and an arrest that could end everything he had built. Yet in this absurdly unfair moment, watching this impoverished, sleep-deprived woman struggle to keep her children from the street while she herself looked ready to collapse, Jack felt his priorities shift with brutal force. He would protect them. He had to. The love he felt for the little girl with the cub's cap burned like a quiet fire in his chest, pushing back against the guilt that threatened to drown him. As the agents led Jack toward the waiting black SUV, Emily stumbled on the broken sidewalk, dizziness, nearly dropping her to her knees. Lily reached up instinctively and took her mother's hand, but her wide eyes kept darting to the powerful man in handcuffs. For one suspended second, their gazes met again. Jack gave the smallest nod, a silent promise that cut through the chaos. In that quiet, condensed stillness, amid the flashing lights and shouting voices, Emily felt a strange mix of horror, anxiety, and an inexplicable spark of hope. She was destitute, powerless, and humiliated beyond words. Yet something in Jack Harlan's eyes told her the night was not over. Not yet. The agents shoved Jack into the back of the vehicle. He turned one last time, watching as Emily gathered her 4 children under the harsh streetlights, the wind whipping her thin coat around her frail frame. His heart twisted violently with remorse and newfound purpose. He had spent years chasing power to escape poverty. Now poverty had found him again in the form of a desperate mother and her children, and it was demanding he finally become the man he had long ago stopped believing he could be. The SUV door slammed shut. Red and blue lights painted the broken buildings in cold colors. Emily stood on the sidewalk, holding Lily close, her body numb with shock and disorientation. Inside her chest, fear and confusion churned violently. Who was this man? Why did he look at her children as if they mattered more than his own freedom? And deep in Jack Harlan's chest, locked in the back of the federal vehicle, the emotional storm raged on. Guilt, remorse, and an intense protective love for a little girl he had only just seen, already burning brighter than any empire he had ever built. The October 2025 wind howled down the south side street, carrying the sharp bite of Lake Michigan and the distant rumble of elevated trains. Emily Harper stood frozen on the cracked sidewalk, her thin coat whipping around her frail body like a flag of surrender. She was 31, but hunger and exhaustion had carved years into her face. Her arms trembled as she tried to shield her 4 children from the chaos. Lily, 7 years old, clutched her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap so tightly her knuckles were white. Tommy, 8, stood rigid beside her, eyes narrowed in street-hardened suspicion. Little Sophie, 5, whimpered softly, and 3-year-old Noah buried his face in Emily's threadbare sweater, his small body shaking from the cold. The federal agents had already loaded Jack Harlan into the back of the black SUV, but the vehicle had not yet pulled away. Jack sat handcuffed, his broad shoulders tense against the leather seat, fair skin pale under the flashing red and blue lights. From the moment he had locked eyes with the desperate family on the stairs, an overwhelming surge of love had ignited inside him, fierce and paternal, burning hotter than any ambition or power he had ever known. This was not the calculated affection of a man who could buy anything. It was raw, protective, almost violent in its intensity. He saw himself in little Lily, the same hollow-eyed hunger he had known as a boy, before he clawed his way out of poverty through deals that still haunted his nights. The remorse was gnawing, tearing at his chest like jagged glass. How many times had he told himself that his empire, the gleaming downtown towers, the fleets of waste management trucks, the hidden influence that kept rival factions at bay, would shield him from ever feeling powerless again. Yet here he was arrested, while a mother and her children faced the tree-blown street in the middle of the night. Inside the SUV, Jack's heart raged in violent conflict. Guilt consumed him. He had rivals circling like wolves, men who wanted his territory, his legitimate construction contracts, his secret networks. One wrong move and they would strike. But none of that mattered in this suspended moment. All he could see was Emily Harper, malnourished and sleep-deprived, her lips blue from nights spent huddled against the wind in a building without heat. The absurdity of the injustice clawed at him. A woman who had done nothing wrong except be poor was being thrown into the cold, while he, a man who had bent the rules of Chicago for years, sat in relative warmth. The inner torment grew sharper, numbing his thoughts, tearing apart the walls he had built around his soul. Then it happened. A shout from the marshals cut through the wind. "Move it, lady. You and the kids are out. No loitering on the sidewalk. Find shelter or we call child services." Emily's knees buckled. Dizziness swept over her, a spinning numbness that made the flashing lights blur into streaks of color. She reached out blindly, grabbing the rusted railing of the stoop to keep from falling. Pain shot through her empty stomach. Horror and anxiety flooded her chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice soft, timid, and polite. the voice of someone who had learned that anger only made things worse when you had nothing. The children. They have nowhere to go. It's cold. Just one night. I'll figure something out by morning. The marshal crossed his arms. Rules are rules. Owner wants the building cleared tonight. You should have paid your rent. The unfairness was absurd. Humiliating. Emily had paid what she could from her diner tips, skipping meals so the children could eat the small portions of macaroni and cheese or peanut butter sandwiches she stretched across days. She had endured nights when the wind howled so loudly through the cracks that sleep was impossible, her thin blanket barely covering 4 small bodies. Now she stood on the sidewalk, possessions in a single plastic bag, her children shivering while the world looked the other way. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she held them back. She could not break. Not yet. From inside the SUV, Jack watched every second. His remorse turned violent, ripping through him with fresh intensity. He had once been that child on the street. He had sworn his power would mean something. Instead, he sat helpless, while this destitute woman faced the same cruelty he had escaped. The love he felt for Lily surged again, passionate and intense, a fatherly fire that demanded action. He leaned toward the agent beside him, his deep voice, low but commanding. "Let me speak to her. 5 seconds. She's terrified." The agent hesitated, then gave a curt nod, perhaps, sensing the weight behind Jack's words. Jack lowered the window just enough. "Emily," he called, his tone steady, despite the storm inside him. "Come closer. Bring the children." Emily froze. Suspicion warred with desperate curiosity. Who was this powerful man who knew her name? Why did his eyes hold such depth, such quiet fury mixed with something softer? Her heart pounded with fear and confusion. She took one hesitant step, then another, guiding the children with her. Lily looked up at Jack with wide, curious eyes, still clutching the cub's cap like a shield. Tommy glared protective and guarded, his small fists clenched. "Sir," Emily said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't know you. We don't want trouble. We'll find a shelter. Somehow." Before Jack could answer, another vehicle screeched around the corner, a dark sedan with tinted windows. 2 men stepped out, broad-shouldered and tense. Rivals. Jack recognized them instantly, foot soldiers from a faction that had been challenging his control over certain construction sites on the west side. They had clearly heard about the arrest and come to gloat or probe for weakness. One of them smirked, voice carrying on the wind. "Look at that, Harlan. Even when they cuff you, the streets still know who's really in charge. Shame about the little family over there. Tough night to be on the street." The words were a deliberate taunt, a bold street confrontation designed to test Jack's reach even while handcuffed. Tension crackled in the air. Jack's jaw tightened. His inner conflict exploded, the powerful man who could order silence with a word now reduced to words alone. Remorse and rage tore at him. These men represented everything he hated about the world he had built, the way power preyed on the weak. He would not let them turn this moment into another humiliation for Emily and the children. "Walk away," Jack said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "This isn't your business." The rival laughed, stepping closer, but the federal agents moved in, creating a tense standoff. No blows were thrown, yet the threat hung heavy, the unspoken promise of future violence simmering just beneath the surface. Emily watched horror rising in her throat. She pulled the children tighter, her body numb with shock. The disparity felt crushing, this wealthy, powerful man, surrounded by agents and luxury, while she stood penniless and exposed her children's teeth chattering in the wind. In the quiet stillness that followed the rivals' retreat, forced back into their sedan by the agents, Jack looked directly at Emily. Their eyes met. In that condensed emotional beat, something shifted. Emily felt a strange, overwhelming trust begin to bloom amid the fear. This man, despite his handcuffs and the chaos, was trying to shield them. Her heart, so long guarded by survival, cracked open with intense burning attachment. Not romance, something deeper. The desperate, once powerless woman inside her surged with hope and confusion. Could someone like him truly see her? See her children? Jack's own heart was in turmoil. The love for Lily, and by extension for the entire fragile family, burned hotter, clashing violently with his gnawing remorse. He had built wealth that could buy buildings, yet he could not instantly fix this night. The inner tearing grew unbearable. He wanted to wrap them in safety, to erase the nights of cold wind and hunger, to give Lily the childhood he never had. His voice softened further. "Emily, stay near the SUV. The agents will let you ride to the station with me until we sort shelter. You and the children don't have to face this alone tonight." Emily hesitated, dizziness still swirling, but she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sir. I don't understand why, but thank you." As the agents reluctantly allowed the small group to move closer, shielding them from the wind, Jack leaned back in his seat. The SUV's heater hummed faintly, a small mercy of warmth that highlighted the vast gulf between his world and theirs. His remorse deepened into something almost painful. He had rivals ready to pounce an empire trembling, yet his thoughts kept returning to the thin, exhausted woman and the little girl with the cub's cap. The protective instinct roared inside him, fierce and unrelenting. In that moment of quiet, emotional stillness, amid flashing lights and distant sirens, Emily felt the first fragile threads of attachment take root. The absurdity of the night eviction in the cold, a powerful stranger offering unexpected kindness, left her disoriented and tearful. Her inner world was being torn apart, fear giving way to a desperate, passionate trust she could not yet name. Jack closed his eyes briefly, the violent conflict in his heart raging on. He would protect them, no matter what it cost his empire, no matter how many street confrontations or betrayals awaited. He would not let this destitute family be broken by the same streets that had once tried to break him. The SUV engine started. Red and blue lights continued to paint the night. But for Emily Harper and her 4 children huddled close to the vehicle that now offered fragile shelter, the long night had taken an unexpected turn, one guided by a man whose inner storm of remorse, love, and determination burned brighter than the city lights around them. The black SUV moved through the October 2025 streets of Chicago, its heater humming softly against the biting wind that still rattled the windows. Emily Harper sat in the back seat with her 4 children pressed close, the faint warmth a luxury she had not felt in months. Her thin frame trembled not entirely from cold. Malnourished and sleep-deprived, she had spent too many nights huddled on the floor of their evicted apartment, listening to the wind howl through cracks while her children shivered beside her. The plastic bag at her feet held everything they owned, a few worn clothes, Lily's faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, and the last crumbs of bread she had saved for breakfast. The disparity felt crushing. Outside, the glittering lights of downtown skyscrapers rose like monuments to a world she could never touch. Inside the vehicle sat Jack Harlan, handcuffed, yet radiating the quiet power of a man whose legitimate construction empire and hidden influence controlled blocks of the city. Emily kept her eyes lowered, her voice soft and timid when she spoke. "Thank you, sir, for letting us ride with you. I don't know what we would have done on the street tonight." Her words were polite, shaped by years of survival, where raising one's voice only invited more trouble. Inside, confusion and fear churned violently. Who was this man? Why had he looked at her children with such raw intensity? Part of her wanted to shrink away, guarded and suspicious. Another part felt an inexplicable pull, a burning curiosity mixed with the first fragile threads of trust. Jack Harlan sat across from them, his fair-skinned face etched with lines that spoke of both power and hidden pain. At 44, he was one of Chicago's most successful men, owner of sprawling construction sites, fleets of waste management trucks that moved through the city like arteries, and wealth that could buy entire neighborhoods. Yet the handcuffs bit into his wrists, a constant reminder of how quickly empires could crack. His heart was in turmoil, the inner tearing growing sharper with every mile. Gnawing remorse clawed at him. He had once been poor like them, sleeping in alleys, promising himself that money and power would erase that shame forever. Now he saw the truth: his success had distanced him from the very suffering he once knew. Seeing Emily's hollow cheeks and the way Lily clutched that cub's cap like a lifeline filled him with violent emotional conflict. An overwhelming paternal love surged through him, intense and passionate from the first moment he had seen the little girl. It was not romance. It was the fierce need to protect, to shield, to give this child the safety he had never truly found. The remorse was almost unbearable. How could he sit here in relative comfort while this destitute family had nothing? The SUV slowed as they approached a quieter stretch of road near the river. Suddenly, headlights flashed behind them. A dark sedan pulled alongside, matching their speed. Jack's body tensed. He recognized the silhouette in the passenger seat, one of his rivals, a man from a faction that had been challenging his control over key construction contracts on the South Side. The window of the sedan lowered. The rival's voice carried clearly through the night air. "Harlan, heard you got picked up. Bad timing. Some of your sites are looking vulnerable tonight. Wouldn't want anything to happen to your interests." The taunt was bold, an unexpected street confrontation designed to probe for weakness even while federal agents rode in the front seat. Tension thickened the air inside the SUV. Jack's jaw tightened, his inner storm raging. Remorse mixed with cold fury. These men would exploit any crack, And right now, the biggest crack was the family sitting beside him. He could not let them become targets. His voice remained calm but edged with steel. "Keep driving. This ends here." The agents in the front exchanged glances, but did not intervene as the sedan peeled away into the night. The confrontation left a heavy silence. Emily's hands shook. Horror and anxiety flooded her chest. She pulled the children closer, dizziness washing over her again, a numbing disorientation that made the passing streetlights blur. "Who were those men?" she whispered, her voice small and fearful. "Are they dangerous? I don't want my children anywhere near trouble." Jack looked at her, his blue eyes deep with conflict. In that quiet, condensed emotional stillness, the disparity between them felt almost absurdly unfair. He wore an expensive coat that cost more than Emily had earned in a year. His world included private meetings in downtown towers and accounts that moved millions. Hers was survival, skipping meals so her children could eat, enduring cold nights where the wind felt like punishment for simply existing. The injustice tore at him. He had built power to escape poverty, yet poverty had found him again in the most heartbreaking form. A thin, exhausted mother, trying desperately to hold her family together. "Emily," he said gently, his tone carrying the weight of a man who had seen too much. "Those men are part of the old world I'm trying to leave behind. You and the children are safe with me tonight. I give you my word." Emily met his gaze for the first time. Shock and confusion swirled inside her, violent and tearing. She had spent years learning not to trust powerful men. They took what they wanted and left the poor to suffer. Yet something in Jack's eyes was different. A deep, burning attachment began to form, passionate in its intensity. This man, despite his own crisis, was offering protection. The mindset of someone who had been powerless for so long cracked under the sudden warmth of being seen, of being shielded. Tears pricked her eyes. She looked away, overwhelmed. At the federal building, the agents allowed a brief stop in a secure waiting area before processing. Jack was permitted a short conversation under supervision. Emily sat on a hard bench, her children curled against her. Lily's small hand reached out and touched the edge of Jack's coat. "Mr. Are you okay?" the 7-year-old asked, her voice innocent and curious. Jack's heart nearly broke. The paternal love surged again, fiercer than before. He wanted to wrap this child in safety, to erase the hunger lines on her face, to give her the childhood he had lost. Remorse gnawed deeper. How many times had he ignored the suffering in his own city while building his empire? The inner conflict was violent now, tearing apart the careful walls he had constructed around his emotions. In that moment, Emily made a quiet decision. From the plastic bag she carried, she pulled a small flash drive she had kept hidden. It was something she had found weeks earlier when she had briefly cleaned an office connected to one of Jack's legitimate businesses, a side job that had paid a few dollars. She had copied suspicious documents and messages after overhearing conversations that did not feel right. She had kept it out of fear and confusion, never imagining it would matter. "Sir," she said softly, her voice timid and polite as she leaned closer so only he could hear. "I don't know if this helps, but I found this. There were papers and messages that seemed wrong. I copied them because something felt unfair. I didn't know what to do with it." Jack's eyes widened slightly. The flash drive represented hidden evidence records of irregular transactions, notes from rivals trying to frame him, communications that could shift the balance of his case. It was a revelation that could change everything. But more than that, it was proof of Emily's quiet integrity in the face of her own misery. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The overwhelming trust and attachment in his heart burned brighter. This destitute woman, who had every reason to stay silent and protect only herself, had chosen to help. His remorse deepened into something almost painful. He had lived with gnawing guilt over the compromises of his past. Now a woman who had endured humiliating poverty, nights of cold wind, days without enough food, the constant fear of losing her children, was offering him a lifeline. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do that. You have no idea what this means." In the quiet stillness of the waiting area, with her children sleeping fitfully against her, Emily felt the inner tearing ease just a fraction. Confusion still swirled, mixed with deep disorientation, and the dizzying realization that a powerful man was looking at her family with genuine care. The absurdity of the night eviction, arrest, street confrontations, and now this unexpected bond left her emotionally raw. Yet the attachment grew intense and passionate in its purity. For the first time in years, she felt seen not as a burden but as someone worthy of protection. Jack leaned back the handcuffs, a cold reminder of his vulnerability. His heart raged with violent conflict. The love he felt for Lily, and the responsibility he now carried for all 4 children, clashed with the remorse of his past choices. Rivals were circling closer after that street encounter. His empire was under threat. Yet none of it compared to the fierce determination now burning inside him. He would protect this family. He would shield them from the cold, from hunger, from the unfairness that had stripped them bare. As the agents prepared to move him further into processing, Jack looked at Emily one last time. In that condensed emotional beat, the vast gap between wealth and poverty felt both insurmountable and strangely bridgeable. A powerful man, torn by inner torment, had found a reason to fight that had nothing to do with money or power. And a destitute mother, once guarded and suspicious, felt the first warm light of trust beginning to chase away the long nights of cold wind and despair. The bond had begun quiet, fragile, yet already deep enough to reshape both their worlds. The October 2025 night had stretched into the early hours by the time the federal building released Jack Harlan on temporary conditions. His lawyer had worked quickly, arranging for a monitored release while the case unfolded. Emily Harper and her 4 children had been allowed to stay in a small, secure waiting area until arrangements could be made. But the system moved slowly for those with nothing. By the time they stepped back into the cold Chicago air, the wind had grown harsher, cutting through Emily's thin coat like invisible blades. She was 31, yet looked far older from years of hunger. Her cheeks were sunken, her arms thin from months of stretching every scrap of food for her children. Sleep had become a forgotten luxury night, spent listening to the wind howl through cracks in walls, her body curled around Lily, Tommy, Sophie, and Noah to share what little warmth she had. Jack Harlan walked beside them, his expensive coat, a stark contrast to her threadbare one. At 44, he was a powerful man whose legitimate construction, empire, and waste management businesses generated wealth most people could only imagine. Yet the weight of the temporary monitoring device on his ankle felt like a chain. His fair-skinned face showed the strain of inner torment that had only grown sharper since the arrest. The paternal love he felt for little Lily burned with fierce intensity, a protective fire that clashed violently with the gnawing remorse tearing at his heart. He had once been desperately poor. Now he possessed the means to change lives, yet every delay, every bureaucratic wall reminded him how easily the system crushed those without power. The disparity was humiliating for Emily and agonizing for him. They had barely reached a quieter side street when a black luxury sedan pulled up. The door opened and a sharply dressed woman stepped out, Sophia, Jack's ambitious associate, who had been managing parts of his legitimate operations in his absence. Her expression was cold, calculated. "Jack," she said, her voice clipped. "We need to talk. Privately." Jack's jaw tightened. He knew this was not just a conversation. Rivals had been testing his control all night. Sophia's presence carried the scent of shifting loyalties. Emily stood a few steps back, holding her children close. Lily clutched her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Tommy glared protectively. Emily's voice came out soft and timid. "Sir, should we wait somewhere else? I don't want to cause trouble." Sophia's gaze flicked to Emily and the children, her lips curling slightly. "These people, Jack, you can't be serious. We have important matters. Construction contracts worth millions are hanging in the balance. You don't have time for charity cases." The words struck Emily like a physical blow. She felt the humiliation burn deep. A destitute mother reduced to charity in front of her children. Dizziness washed over her, a numbing disorientation that made the streetlights blur. Her stomach ached with emptiness. She had endured too many nights of cold wind, too many days choosing which child would eat the last slice of bread. Now this powerful woman dismissed them as if they were nothing. Horror and anxiety surged inside her, violently tearing at her already fragile composure. Yet she kept her voice polite. "We'll find a shelter. Thank you again for your kindness, sir." Jack's inner world exploded. Remorse clawed at him with fresh violence. He had built wealth and influence to escape the poverty that once defined him. Yet here he stood, watching a thin, malnourished woman, and her 4 shivering children being cast aside again. The paternal love for Lily surged, passionate and intense, demanding he act. "Sophia, enough," he said, his tone low but commanding. "Emily and the children stay with me tonight. Arrange a safe place. Now." Sophia's eyes narrowed. The confrontation escalated in the quiet street. Another vehicle appeared, 2 men from a rival faction stepping out, bold and unexpected. They had clearly been following, sensing weakness after the arrest. One spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "Harlan, your grip is slipping. Word on the street is your sights are up for grabs. And now you're playing hero for some street family. Bad look. Very bad look." The tense street confrontation hung heavy. No blows were exchanged, but the threat was clear. Rivals circling like shadows, ready to exploit any distraction. Jack's heart raged in violent conflict. His empire, built on years of calculated power, now felt like a cage. The remorse was consuming. He had promised himself he would never let children suffer the way he had. Yet every second of delay exposed Emily's misery further. The absurdity was numbing. A wealthy man surrounded by luxury vehicles and influence powerless in this moment to instantly shield a family from the cold. Sophia stepped closer to Jack, lowering her voice. "You're making a mistake. These people will drag you down. I've already spoken to the property manager at one of your buildings. The temporary shelter I arranged has been canceled. They don't want complications. And as for her?" Sophia turned to Emily. "Consider any future cleaning or helping jobs terminated. Effective immediately. We can't risk association." Emily felt the words like a slap, fired before she had even truly begun. The injustice was absurd and deeply pitiful. She had hoped for even the smallest work to feed her children. Now that door slammed shut. Shock and confusion flooded her, leaving her dizzy and off balance. She swayed slightly, pain shooting through her empty stomach. I understand," she whispered, her voice timid and polite despite the inner storm. "I won't be any trouble." But inside, her heart was being violently torn apart. The mindset of someone who had endured humiliating poverty for so long. Nights of freezing wind, days of gnawing hunger. The constant fear of losing her children to the system now faced the crushing weight of sudden rejection from the very world that seemed to offer help. Tears stung her eyes. She pulled the children closer, trying to shield them from the wind. Jack's remorse turned almost unbearable. The paternal love for Lily and the growing attachment to the entire family burned with fierce passion. He wanted to shield them, to erase the hunger lines on their faces, to give them the safety he had clawed his way to achieve. Yet his own world was fracturing. Rivals watching. Sophia clearly positioning herself for more control. The inner conflict raged, numbing his thoughts one moment and igniting fury the next. As the rival's vehicle lingered nearby, another bold confrontation unfolded. One of the men called out, "Harlan, you're distracted. That makes you weak. We'll be watching how you handle this little situation." Jack stepped forward, his powerful frame radiating quiet authority despite the monitoring device on his ankle. "This family is under my protection. Walk away. Now." The rivals exchanged glances and finally retreated into their car, the sedan pulling away into the night. The tension left a heavy silence. In the condensed emotional stillness that followed, Jack made a decision. "Emily, you and the children will come with me to a safe location I control. It's not luxury, but it's warm and secure for tonight." Emily hesitated, fear and curiosity warring inside her. Her voice was soft. "Sir, are you sure I don't want to bring danger to you?" Before Jack could answer, the night took a darker turn. As they moved toward a waiting vehicle arranged by Jack's trusted driver, a sudden screech of tires echoed. Another rival car appeared from a side alley, bold and unexpected. The driver swerved dangerously close, forcing their vehicle to brake hard. In the chaos, Jack pushed Emily and the children behind him, his body shielding them. The rival vehicle clipped the side of their car in a tense, controlled confrontation meant to intimidate rather than destroy. Shouts rang out. "Stay out of our way," Harlan, Emily cried out in horror, grabbing the children. Dizziness and numbness overwhelmed her. She nearly lost her balance, pain flaring as she held Lily tight. The absurdity of the moment tore at her, a destitute, powerless woman caught in the crossfire of powerful men's games, while her children trembled in fear. Jack felt the violent inner tearing reach new heights. His remorse was consuming. He had brought this danger near them by trying to help, yet the paternal love surged stronger, a fierce determination to protect what mattered more than any empire. In the confusion as the rival car sped away, Jack noticed Lily had slipped slightly and scraped her arm on the pavement. The small wound bled lightly. Without hesitation, the 7-year-old tore a strip from her own thin sweater and pressed it against Jack's hand, where a small cut had appeared during the sudden stop. Mister, you're hurt," Lily whispered, her innocent voice cracking with concern. She had meant to say something else, but the words slipped out in the stress of the moment, hitting Jack like a thunderbolt. Jack froze. The paternal love exploded inside him, passionate and overwhelming. That single word from the vulnerable child he had only just met tore through his defenses. Remorse and fierce protectiveness clashed violently. He had failed so many times in his life. He would not fail her. He knelt gently, taking the cloth from Lily's small hand. "I'm okay, sweetheart, but thank you. You're very brave." Emily watched her heart in turmoil. The attachment she felt toward this powerful man who kept shielding them burned deeper, intense, and pure. Confusion and shock left her disoriented, yet the trust was becoming overwhelming. This man, despite his own threats and wealth that dwarfed her poverty, was risking himself for her children. In the quiet aftermath, as they finally reached a secure, modest safe house, Jack controlled a warm apartment with real beds and a kitchen stocked with food. The disparity remained stark. Jack's world included resources that could change everything. Emily's reality was still marked by the humiliating thinness of her arms and the exhaustion in her eyes. Yet in that moment of condensed emotional stillness, with the children finally warm and beginning to doze, Jack felt the inner storm settle into unbreakable resolve. His remorse would fuel him. His love for Lily and the family would guide him. He would protect them no matter how many street confrontations or unjust barriers the night or the coming days threw in their path. Emily sat beside her sleeping children, her voice barely audible. "Thank you. For everything." The words carried the weight of a woman whose inner world had been violently torn and was slowly, hesitantly being pieced back together by unexpected compassion. The night was far from over, but the bond had grown stronger in the face of threat and injustice. The October 2025 morning arrived gray and cold over Chicago, the wind still carrying the bite of Lake Michigan into the federal courthouse downtown. Jack Harlan sat at the defense table in a clean but simple suit, the monitoring device hidden beneath his pant leg. At 44, the fair-skinned, powerful man projected quiet authority, yet his blue eyes held the depth of a soul in turmoil. His legitimate construction, empire, and waste management businesses represented wealth beyond measure. Gleaming towers, fleets of trucks, accounts that moved sums most people could never imagine. But today none of that shielded him from the weight of the charges or the gnawing remorse that had only intensified since the night of his arrest. Across the room, Emily Harper sat in the second row with her 4 children. She looked painfully out of place in the formal courtroom. Her thin frame was malnourished from months of stretching every dollar, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights spent protecting her children from the cold wind that howled through their former crumbling apartment. She wore the same threadbare coat from the eviction, now cleaned as best she could. Lily, 7 years old, clutched her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap in her lap. Tommy, 8, sat rigidly protective beside her. Little Sophie and Noah leaned against their mother, their small bodies still showing the effects of too many hungry days and freezing nights. The disparity was stark and humiliating. Jack's world included private counsel and influence that could shift outcomes. Emily's reality was survival, the constant fear of losing her children, the humiliation of being seen as charity, the inner torment of wondering if she had failed them simply by being poor. Emily's hands trembled in her lap. Her voice, when she had spoken to the lawyer earlier, had been soft, timid, and polite. "I only want to help if it does not hurt the children," she had whispered. Inside, confusion and anxiety churned violently. She had gone from suspicion to an overwhelming, burning attachment to this powerful man who kept shielding them despite his own crisis. The trust felt dangerous, yet it burned with passionate intensity. She was no longer just desperate and powerless. She felt seen, protected in a way that left her heart raw and disoriented. The hearing began. The prosecutor presented evidence of irregular transactions and suspicious movements tied to Jack's businesses. The atmosphere grew tense. Then Jack's lawyer called Emily to the stand. She rose on unsteady legs, dizziness washing over her as she walked the short distance. Every eye turned toward the thin, exhausted woman who looked as if a strong wind could knock her down. She took the oath in a quiet voice, her politeness a shield against the weight of the room. "Miss Harper," the lawyer began gently, "can you tell the court what you observed and what you brought forward?" Emily swallowed hard. Her inner world was being torn apart, fear clashing with the fierce need to do what was right. She spoke softly, choosing words carefully. I worked a few small cleaning jobs connected to some of Mr. Harlan's buildings. One evening I found papers and messages that seemed wrong. Transactions at odd hours. Notes that did not match the honest work I saw Mr. Harlan doing. I copied them onto a flash drive because something felt deeply unfair. I kept it because I did not know who to trust. The courtroom listened in heavy silence. Emily's testimony revealed the hidden evidence records that pointed away from Jack and toward manipulation by others in his circle. Her words carried the quiet dignity of a woman who had endured too much, yet still chose integrity. Jack watched her, his heart in violent conflict. The paternal love for Lily and the growing fierce attachment to the entire family burned hotter than ever. Seeing Emily stand there vulnerable and brave despite her poverty filled him with overwhelming remorse. He had once been desperately poor like her, sleeping in alleys, promising himself power would erase the shame. Now that same power had dragged an innocent family into danger. The inner tearing was almost unbearable, gnawing guilt over past compromises, mixing with fierce determination to protect them. In a quiet, condensed emotional stillness, their eyes met. Emily's gaze held shock and deepening trust. Jax held a love so intense and paternal that it felt like a vow. But the drama escalated. As Emily continued, the prosecutor pressed harder, attempting to discredit her. "Miss Harper, you are currently homeless, correct? Living on the charity of the very man you claim to be helping. How can we trust your testimony when you have everything to gain?" The question was cruel and absurdly unfair. Emily felt the humiliation like a physical blow. Her cheeks burned. She was thin, malnourished, sleep-deprived, a mother who had endured countless cold nights with her children pressed against her for warmth. Now the court stripped her misery bare in front of everyone. Dizziness and numbness swept over her. She gripped the edge of the witness stand, pain flaring in her empty stomach. Horror and anxiety tore at her violently. "I have nothing to gain except safety for my children," she whispered, her voice timid yet steady. "I only told the truth because it was the right thing." The room fell into a heavy hush. Jack's remorse exploded into fresh agony. The injustice of watching this destitute woman humiliated while he sat with resources that could change everything left him numb. His inner world was being violently torn, the powerful man who could command respect, now helpless against bureaucratic cruelty. Then came the new twist that shattered the courtroom. Jack's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have additional evidence obtained through medical records requested for the children's temporary safety. The results show a clear biological connection. Lily Harper is Mr. Harlan's biological daughter, confirmed through DNA testing prompted by physical resemblance, and a family locket Emily's late sister left behind. This was a brief connection years ago that Mr. Harlan never knew about until now." Gasps rippled through the room. Emily's world tilted. Shock and deep disorientation flooded her. She nearly lost her balance, gripping the stand as dizziness overwhelmed her. The revelation tore through her with violent intensity. Lily, her precious 7-year-old, who had suffered hunger and cold beside her, was the daughter of this powerful man. Confusion swirled numbingly. How had she not seen it? The attachment she felt toward Jack suddenly carried new weight, passionate and burning. She looked at Lily, who stared at Jack with wide, curious eyes still clutching her cub's cap. Jack felt the emotional upheaval like a thunderclap. His paternal love for Lily, already fierce and overwhelming from the first moment, now exploded into something deeper and more consuming. Remorse gnawed at him with savage force. He had built an empire while his own flesh and blood had endured poverty and cold winds. The violent inner conflict raged guilt over years of absence he never knew existed, clashing with a fierce protective determination that burned away every other priority. He had been desperately poor once. Now suddenly a child of his own blood had been living in misery while he amassed wealth. The mindset of a man who had escaped poverty only to unknowingly leave his daughter in it left him psychologically shattered. Lily looked at Jack across the courtroom. In a small, innocent voice, she said, "Is that why you helped us, mister? Because I'm your little girl." The simple question cut through the tension like a blade. Jack's eyes filled with emotion he could not hide. The courtroom fell into profound stillness. Emily's heart was being violently torn apart, fear for her daughter's future mixing with an intense, burning trust in the man who had shielded them. She felt dizzy, numb, and deeply moved. The absurdity of the moment was heartbreaking. A destitute mother learning in open court that her child belonged to one of Chicago's most powerful men, while she herself still carried the marks of humiliating poverty. Rivals had been watching from the back of the room. As the hearing paused, one of them slipped out, but not before casting a bold, threatening glance toward Jack. A silent, street-level promise of future confrontation. The tension escalated. Jack knew his factions were shifting. Enemies would see this revelation as weakness to exploit. In that quiet, emotional beat, Jack made a silent vow. His remorse would no longer paralyze him. The paternal love surging through him for Lily, and the protective attachment extending to Emily and all 4 children became his anchor. He would fight for them. He would shield them from hunger, cold, and the unjust systems that had stripped them bare. Emily stepped down from the stand, her legs unsteady. She returned to her seat, pulling Lily close. The 7-year-old looked up at her mother with curious, trusting eyes. "Mommy, does this mean we don't have to be cold anymore?" Emily could only nod, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Her inner world was a storm of shock, confusion, and overwhelming attachment. The powerful man who had protected them from eviction, from street threats, from dismissal, was now tied to them by blood and by choice. The disparity between his wealth and her poverty felt both vast and miraculously bridgeable in this moment. Jack sat at the defense table, his heart raging with violent conflict. The new twist had exposed everything. His empire trembled. Rivals circled closer. Yet the paternal love burning inside him for his daughter and the family that had suffered so unjustly gave him a clarity he had never known. The remorse was still there, gnawing and deep, but it now fueled a fierce resolve. As the hearing continued, the evidence Emily had provided began to shift the balance. The hidden records pointed clearly toward manipulation by others. In the condensed stillness of the courtroom, with the wind still howling outside against the tall windows, two worlds had collided, the world of power and the world of desperate survival, and neither would ever be the same. The testimony had exposed more than financial schemes. It had exposed hearts long buried under layers of wealth and poverty alike. And in the center of it all stood a little girl with a faded cub's cap, unknowingly healing the wounds of a powerful man who had finally found something worth protecting more than any empire. The October 2025 evening settled over Chicago with a heavy chill that seeped into every corner of the modest safe house Jack Harlan had arranged on the quieter edge of the North Side. The apartment was warm and clean, a far cry from the wind-whipped, crumbling walk-up where Emily Harper and her 4 children had once huddled together. Yet even here, the vast disparity between worlds remained painfully visible. Jack's wealth showed in the quiet efficiency of the place, stocked kitchen, soft beds, and the faint scent of fresh linens that spoke of resources most people never touched. Emily, by contrast, moved through the rooms like a shadow of exhaustion. At 31, she was painfully thin, her arms marked by months of malnutrition, her eyes ringed with the sleepless nights she had spent shielding Lily, Tommy, Sophie, and Noah from the cold wind that had become their constant companion. She still wore the same threadbare coat now hanging loosely on her frail frame, a humiliating reminder of how close they had come to the street. Jack sat in the living room, his powerful frame filling the armchair, the monitoring device on his ankle, a constant silent weight. At 44, the fair-skinned man who controlled vast construction empires and waste management networks should have felt in command. Instead, his heart was a battlefield of escalating torment. The courtroom revelation that Lily was his biological daughter had torn open old wounds with violent force. Gnawing remorse consumed him. He had escaped desperate poverty as a boy, only to unknowingly leave his own child in the same cold, hungry darkness. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with overwhelming intensity, passionate and protective, clashing violently with the deep guilt that left him numb one moment and raw the next. Every time he looked at the 7-year-old clutching her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, the inner tearing grew sharper. How could he have built towers of wealth, while his daughter endured nights of freezing wind and days of empty plates? Emily moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal from the supplies provided. Her hands trembled slightly as she sliced apples, a small luxury she had not been able to afford in months. Lily and Tommy helped set the table, their small faces still showing traces of the fear from the previous night's street confrontations. Sophie and Noah sat close together on the couch, their tiny bodies finally warm but still carrying the exhaustion of too many uncertain days. The quiet, condensed emotional stillness was suddenly broken by the sound of a vehicle outside. Jack rose instantly, his body tensing. Through the window, he saw a dark sedan slow down its headlights, cutting through the evening gloom. Rivals again. One of the men stepped out briefly, bold and unexpected, staring toward the safe house before driving away. It was a tense, street-level message, a reminder that Jack's empire was under siege, and any distraction made him vulnerable. The confrontation, though wordless, heightened the suspense, leaving a heavy tension in the air. Jack's inner conflict raged harder, remorse mixed with fierce determination. He would not let these threats touch the children. Yet the absurdity of the situation tore at him, a powerful man forced to hide in his own city while trying to protect a family that had suffered so unjustly. That night, as the children settled into beds, the crisis deepened. Lily woke first, her small body trembling from a nightmare. She slipped out of bed and padded into the living room where Jack sat awake, staring at the city lights through the window. The 7-year-old climbed onto the couch beside him without a word and rested her head against his arm. "The bad men won't come back, right?" she whispered, her voice innocent and curious. Jack felt his heart crack wide open. The paternal love surged through him like a fierce wave, intense and burning. He gently wrapped an arm around her, careful not to startle her. "No, sweetheart, I won't let them." His voice was rough with emotion. In that quiet moment, Lily's small hand reached up and patted his cheek, as if comforting him instead of the other way around. The simple gesture from the vulnerable child he had only recently learned was his own struck him with extreme psychological shock. He who had clawed his way from poverty through deals and power was now being healed by the innocent kindness of a little girl who had known only hunger and cold. Emily appeared in the doorway, her thin frame silhouetted by the soft light. She had been watching her own heart in turmoil. Confusion and deepening attachment warred inside her. She had gone from desperate suspicion to an overwhelming, passionate trust in this man who kept risking himself for them. Seeing Lily comfort, Jack left her dizzy with disorientation and a profound, moving tenderness. Her voice came out soft and timid. She has always been like that, trying to take care of everyone even when she has nothing. Before Jack could respond, Tommy woke and joined them, his 8-year-old face guarded at first. He had witnessed the street confrontations and still carried deep distrust of powerful men. "Why are you really helping us?" Tommy asked bluntly, his tone revealing the inner torment of a boy who had seen too much unfairness in the South Side streets. Jack met the boy's eyes. The question pierced him. Remorse gnawed violently. He had once been that distrustful child. Now his wealth and influence felt hollow in the face of their suffering. "Because I was once where you are," he said quietly. "And because Lily. Because all of you deserve better than the cold nights and empty plates I see in your eyes." The drama escalated in the early morning hours when another unreasonable event struck. A call came from Jack's lawyer. Temporary custody arrangements were being delayed by bureaucratic hurdles. Officials cited Emily's recent eviction and lack of stable housing as reasons to question her fitness, threatening to place the children in emergency foster care despite Jack's offers to provide for them. The injustice was absurd and deeply humiliating. Emily collapsed into a chair, dizziness and numbness overwhelming her. Pain shot through her empty stomach as the reality sank in. She had endured months of cold wind and hunger only to face the possibility of her children being taken away in the very moment safety seemed possible. Horror and anxiety tore at her violently. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "Please, not my babies. They have already suffered so much." Jack's inner world fractured further. The violent conflict inside him reached new intensity, gnawing remorse over his past absence from Lily's life, mixing with a consuming rage at the system that continued to punish poverty. His wealth could buy buildings, yet it could not instantly silence bureaucratic cruelty. In that condensed emotional stillness, with Emily quietly crying and the children beginning to stir, Lily once again became the quiet healer. The little girl crawled into Jack's lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. She began to sing in a soft, sweet voice the simple American lullaby, "You Are My Sunshine," the same one her late mother had sung on the coldest nights. Her innocent kindness washed over Jack like warm light. The paternal love he felt burned brighter, healing the deep emotional wounds of a man who had long buried his own vulnerabilities under layers of power. Tommy watched the scene, his guarded expression softening. He moved closer, and in a small act of trust offered Jack a drawing. He had made a simple picture of a strong man standing beside 4 children under a sunny sky. Maybe you're not like the others," the boy murmured. Sophie and Noah joined them, their tiny hands clutching at Jack's sleeves. The 4 children surrounded him in a quiet circle of warmth, their presence a powerful contrast to the cold world outside. Emily watched, her heart violently torn between fear for the future and an intense burning attachment to the man who was becoming their shield. The mindset of a woman who had been desperately poor and powerless was shifting dramatically, suddenly protected and valued by a wealthy, powerful figure whose own inner storms mirrored her pain. Jack felt the children's healing touch reach the deepest parts of his soul. The remorse that had gnawed at him since the arrest now mixed with profound gratitude. He had faced rivals in tense street confrontations, watched his empire tremble, and confronted the shocking truth of his daughter's suffering. Yet in this moment of crisis, the innocent kindness of these children especially, Lily's gentle singing and comforting presence, was slowly mending the wounds of a man who had long forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen and needed. Outside, another dark sedan passed slowly, rivals sending another bold, silent warning. The suspense lingered, but inside the safe house a different kind of strength was forming. In the quiet, emotional stillness, with the wind still howling against the windows, Jack Harlan realized that his greatest power might not lie in his construction empires or hidden influence. It lay in the fragile healing bond, forming with a destitute family that had unknowingly begun to redeem the powerful man who had once been as lost as they were. Emily sat nearby, her thin hands folded in her lap. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft and filled with quiet wonder. "They have never had anyone like this. Thank you for letting them heal you too." The night deepened, but the inner storms, though still raging, were slowly being calmed by the smallest hands and the purest hearts. The North Side safe house, the wind still whispering against the windows like a reminder of the harsh streets below. Inside, the warmth of the apartment stood in stark, almost cruel contrast to the world Emily Harper had known for so long. She moved through the kitchen with the quiet caution of someone who had learned that comfort could vanish in an instant. At 31, her body remained painfully thin and malnourished. her arms marked by months of hunger, her eyes heavy from endless sleepless nights spent huddling with her 4 children against the freezing wind that had once howled through the cracks of their crumbling apartment. The simple breakfast she prepared, eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, felt like an impossible luxury, yet even as she set the table, humiliation lingered in her chest. She was still the destitute mother who had been evicted in the middle of the night, the woman whose poverty had been laid bare in open court. Jack Harlan stood by the large window, his powerful frame silhouetted against the gray morning light. At 44, the fair-skinned man commanded respect in Chicago's construction and waste management worlds, his wealth evident in the quiet confidence of the safe house he had secured, and the resources that kept threats at bay, yet his heart was a storm of escalating torment. The paternal love he felt for Lily, now confirmed as his biological daughter, burned with fierce protective intensity. It clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that had grown sharper since the courtroom revelation. He had escaped desperate poverty as a boy, only to unknowingly condemn his own child to cold nights and empty plates. The inner tearing was becoming almost unbearable, a violent conflict that left him numb and raw in turns. Every small act of kindness from the children chipped away at the walls he had built around his soul, forcing him to confront the man. He had become powerful, wealthy, yet emotionally distant for years. Lily, 7 years old, sat at the table wearing her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, eating with quiet wonder. Tommy, 8, sat beside her, his expression still guarded. Sophie and Noah ate happily, their small faces finally losing some of the exhaustion that had shadowed them for so long. The scene should have brought peace, but tension simmered beneath the surface. The first unreasonable event of the day arrived through a phone call. Jack's lawyer informed him that certain city officials, citing Emily's recent homelessness and lack of formal employment, were pushing for an emergency review of the children's living situation. The threat of temporary foster placement hung in the air again, despite Jack's offers to provide stable housing and support. The injustice was absurd and deeply pitiful. Emily froze a plate, slipping from her hands and clattering into the sink. Dizziness swept over her, a numbing disorientation that made the room tilt. Pain flared in her empty stomach, a humiliating reminder of how many meals she had skipped so her children could eat. Horror and anxiety tore through her violently. "Not again," she whispered, her voice soft, timid, and polite even in her distress. "They have finally slept through the night without shivering. Please, do not take them from me now." Jack felt the words like a physical blow. His remorse exploded into fresh agony. The powerful man who could move millions in contracts now stood powerless against bureaucratic cruelty that continued to punish poverty. The violent inner conflict raged, harder guilt over his past absence from Lily's life, mixing with a consuming determination to fight for them. He had faced rivals in tense street confrontations, yet this quiet, systemic unfairness felt even more crushing. As the morning progressed, another bold confrontation unfolded on the street below. A dark sedan cruised slowly past the building windows, lowering just enough for one of Jack's rivals to be visible. The man called out loudly enough to be heard through the partially open window, his voice carrying a taunting edge. "Harlan hiding behind kids now. Your construction sites are bleeding contracts. Keep playing house and you'll lose everything. We'll be watching every move." The unexpected street-level threat heightened the suspense, a wordless promise of escalating pressure from opposing factions. Jack stepped to the window, his jaw tight, but he did not engage. The sedan drove away, leaving heavy tension in its wake. Emily watched from the kitchen, fear and heightened curiosity mixing inside her. She pulled the children closer, her thin frame trembling. The disparity felt overwhelming, Jack's world of power and influence constantly under siege, while her own reality remained one of humiliating vulnerability. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed, Tommy's conflict surfaced. The 8-year-old had been watching Jack with deepening suspicion. He had seen too much on the South Side, powerful men who made promises, and then disappeared, leaving families broken. When Lily reached for Jack's hand and called him softly by the word that had slipped out in court, Tommy stood up abruptly, his small fists clenched. "Don't trust him, Lily," Tommy said, his voice sharp with the guarded protectiveness of a boy who had endured too much unfairness. "Powerful men like him only bring trouble. They act nice until they get what they want, then they leave people like us on the street again. Remember how cold it was, how hungry we got. He'll do the same." The words hung in the air like a slap. Emily's heart twisted violently. She felt shock and confusion flood her, a numbing disorientation that left her dizzy and off balance. Her voice came out soft and pleading. "Tommy, he has helped us when no one else would. Please not now." Lily looked between them, her wide eyes filled with innocent curiosity and hurt. She clutched her cub's cap tighter, torn between her growing attachment to Jack and her best friend's warning. The scene tore at everyone's inner worlds. Jack felt the remark like a blade. His remorse gnawed with savage intensity. He had once been the distrustful child on the street, suspicious of anyone with power. Now he stood on the other side, wealthy and influential, yet accused of the very betrayal he had feared as a boy. The paternal love for Lily surged passionately, but it clashed with extreme psychological shock. The mindset of a man who had escaped poverty only to be seen as a threat by the very children he desperately wanted to protect. The violent inner tearing left him numb, his powerful hands clenching at his sides. The drama escalated when another unjust blow landed. A courier arrived with official papers stating that due to ongoing investigations into Jack's businesses, any financial support he provided for the family could be frozen or questioned. The system seemed determined to strip away the fragile safety net just as it was forming. Emily sank into a chair, her thin body shaking. The humiliation was profound. A destitute mother whose every attempt at stability was met with new barriers. Tears slipped down her cheeks as dizziness and pain overwhelmed her. "Why does it keep happening?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "We have done nothing wrong except be poor." In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, with the children watching wide-eyed, Lily made a small, brave move. She walked over to Tommy and took his hand, then led him to Jack. "He's not like the bad men," she said softly. "He stayed when the wind was cold. He gave us warm beds. And he looks at me like I matter." Tommy hesitated, his guarded expression cracking. The conflict inside the boy was intense fear of disappointment warring with the evidence of Jack's consistent protection. He finally stepped closer, his voice quieter. "If you hurt them, if you leave like the others, I'll never forgive you." Jack knelt to the boy's level, his voice rough with emotion. "I was once where you are, Tommy. Cold, hungry, angry at the world. I promise I will not leave. Not you. Not any of you." The paternal love burning inside Jack reached new depths, passionate and fierce. Seeing Tommy's slow shift from distrust to tentative trust healed something deep within him. His remorse, though still gnawing, began to transform into purpose. The powerful man who commanded empires felt strangely humbled by the innocent hearts of these children who had endured so much unjust suffering. Emily watched the exchange, her own inner world violently torn apart and slowly mending. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward Jack, born from suspicion, and now burning with intense trust, left her disoriented yet deeply moved. She had been desperately powerless for so long. Suddenly, a wealthy, powerful man was fighting for her family while confronting his own demons. The absurdity of the contrast evoked quiet tears, her humiliating poverty against his growing willingness to risk everything for them. Later that afternoon, another tense street confrontation unfolded. As they stepped outside for fresh air under careful supervision, a rival vehicle slowed nearby, the occupants staring boldly before driving on a silent warning that the factions were still circling. Jack positioned himself protectively in front of Emily and the children, his presence a shield. The suspense lingered, but no words were exchanged. In the quiet, emotional stillness that followed as the group returned inside, Tommy finally broke. He approached Jack with tears in his eyes. "I was wrong to say those things. You came back for us when the bad men tried to scare us. You didn't run." The boy's emotional turning point was raw and moving, revealing the deeper truths of a child who had known only broken promises. Jack pulled Tommy into a gentle embrace, his heart swelling with paternal warmth that extended to all 4 children. The violent inner conflict eased just enough for clarity to emerge. His remorse would fuel him. His love for Lily and the family would guide every decision. Emily stood nearby, her voice soft and filled with quiet wonder. "They are healing you, and you are healing us." The day had been filled with unjust barriers and tense threats, yet in the condensed emotional beats between them, the bond grew stronger. A powerful man, once lost in his own empire, was awakening to the simple truth that true strength came from protecting the vulnerable hearts that had unknowingly begun to save him. The North Side safe house, yet the wind outside still carried the sharp reminder of how quickly safety could slip away. Emily Harper stood by the window, her thin frame silhouetted against the gray light. At 31, she remained painfully malnourished, her cheeks hollow from too many skipped meals, her body marked by months of exhaustion and nights spent shielding her 4 children from the freezing wind that had once howled through their evicted apartment. The simple clothes she wore still carried the faint wear of poverty, a humiliating contrast to the clean, warm apartment around her. She moved with the cautious grace of someone who had learned that good things often came with a price. Jack Harlan paced slowly near the kitchen table, his powerful presence filling the space. At 44, the fair-skinned man commanded vast construction empires and waste management networks that generated wealth beyond ordinary measure. Yet the monitoring device on his ankle and the weight of ongoing legal proceedings kept him grounded. His heart was in deeper turmoil than ever. The paternal love for Lily burned with fierce protective intensity, now extending to all 4 children, and to Emily herself as the steadfast mother who had endured so much. This love clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that had only grown since the courtroom revelation. He had escaped desperate poverty as a boy building power and fortune, only to discover his own daughter had suffered the same cold, hungry nights he once knew. The inner tearing was becoming almost unbearable, a violent emotional conflict that left him numb with guilt, one moment and filled with raw determination the next. The children played quietly in the living room. Lily, 7 years old, wore her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, while drawing pictures of a big house with a backyard. Tommy, 8, sat beside her, his earlier distrust softened into cautious trust after their heartfelt talk. Sophie and Noah colored together their small laughter, a sound that still felt like a miracle after so many hard months. The first blow of the day came through a phone call from Jack's lawyer. City officials had raised new objections, claiming that Jack's ongoing case made any financial or housing support he offered compromised. They proposed placing the children in temporary emergency foster care while stability was reviewed. The injustice was absurd and deeply cruel. Emily's hands began to shake. Dizziness washed over her, a numbing disorientation that made the floor seem to tilt. Pain flared in her empty stomach, a humiliating echo of the many days she had gone without so her children could eat. Horror and anxiety tore through her violently. She sank into a chair, her voice coming out soft, timid, and polite despite the storm inside. They cannot take them now, not after everything. The children have finally known warmth. Please, I have nothing left if they are taken. Jack felt the words rip through him like fire. His remorse exploded with fresh violence. The powerful man who could move millions in contracts now faced the same bureaucratic walls that had crushed Emily for years. The disparity was crushing his wealth, could buy entire buildings, yet it could not instantly silence a system that continued to punish poverty. The inner conflict raged harder, tearing apart the careful control he had maintained for so long. As tension built inside the safe house, another bold street confrontation unfolded outside. A dark sedan cruised past slowly, windows lowering just enough for one of Jack's rivals to be clearly visible. The man called out in a loud, taunting voice that carried through the partially open window, "Harlan, your time is running out. Those construction contracts are slipping away. Keep hiding with your new little family, and you'll lose everything you built. We're ready to move in." The unexpected threat heightened the suspense, a clear message from opposing factions that Jack's distraction with the family was seen as weakness. Jack stepped to the window, his jaw set, but he did not rise to the bait. The sedan drove away, leaving heavy silence in its wake. Emily watched fear and confusion swirling inside her. She pulled the children closer, her thin body trembling. The absurdity of the moment left her dizzy and off balance, a destitute mother caught between powerful men's games while her own survival still felt so fragile. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the hearing, resumed via remote link from the federal courthouse, Jack's lawyer presented the full evidence Emily had provided: the hidden records, the irregular transactions, and the proof that pointed clearly toward manipulation by others in Jack's circle, particularly Sophia and certain rival-connected associates. The judge reviewed the materials carefully. The courtroom atmosphere, even through the screen, grew heavy with anticipation. Emily was asked to speak again briefly. She stood in the safe house living room, her voice soft and steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I only wanted to do what was right. The children needed safety. Mr. Harlan gave us that when no one else would. I copied those papers because something felt deeply unfair. That is all." Her simple words carried the quiet dignity of a woman who had endured humiliating poverty, thin, sleep-deprived, and powerless for so long, yet still chose honesty. Jack listened, his heart swelling with overwhelming paternal love and attachment. The remorse gnawed at him violently. He had built an empire while this brave woman and his own daughter suffered in the cold. The mindset of a man who had once been desperately poor now collided with the reality of suddenly being the protector. The violent inner tearing left him emotionally raw. Then came the resolution. The judge ruled clearly. The evidence presented by Emily was compelling and credible. The charges against Jack were significantly weakened, with the case shifting focus toward those who had attempted to frame him. Jack was granted permission to provide full support for the family. A family court order was issued, granting Emily temporary guardianship with substantial assistance from Jack, including stable housing and resources for the children. The immediate threat of foster placement was removed. Justice, though imperfect, had begun to turn in their favor. The moment the ruling was announced, the room filled with quiet emotion. Lily ran to Jack and wrapped her small arms around his leg. "We can stay together," she asked, her voice filled with innocent hope. Jack knelt, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart, we stay together." The paternal love surging through him was fierce and healing, pushing back against the remorse that still lingered. In that condensed emotional stillness, with the children gathered around him, he felt the first true sense of purpose beyond power and money. Yet even in resolution, an absurdly unfair event struck. A final message arrived from city housing authorities. Due to administrative delays, the immediate permanent housing Jack had arranged would take several more days to finalize. Emily would need to remain in the safe house a little longer, still technically in a state of transition. The news felt like a slap after the courtroom victory. Emily's shoulders slumped. Dizziness and numbness returned, pain flaring as the weight of prolonged uncertainty pressed down. She whispered softly, "We have waited so long already. But we will manage. Thank you for fighting for us." Jack's inner world fractured again. The violent conflict inside him intensified, gnawing remorse over every delay mixing with fierce protectiveness. His wealth could solve problems instantly in his business world, yet here it was slowed by bureaucracy that continued to expose Emily's misery. The disparity remained stark, and moving his power and resources against her thin, exhausted frame and the quiet endurance she showed for her children. Tommy approached Jack, his earlier conflict fully resolved. "You kept your promise," the boy said simply, his voice carrying the emotional turning point from distrust to acceptance. "You didn't leave when it got hard." Sophie and Noah climbed into Jack's lap, their small hands clutching his shirt. The 4 children surrounded him in a circle of warmth, and trust their innocent presence healing the deep wounds of a man who had long buried his vulnerabilities under layers of empire building. Emily watched from a few steps away, her heart violently torn and slowly mending. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward Jack, born of suspicion and now burning with intense, passionate trust, left her deeply moved and disoriented. She had been desperately powerless for so long. Suddenly, a wealthy, powerful man was using his influence not for gain but to shield her family. Her voice came out soft and filled with quiet gratitude. "You have given them more than a roof. You have given them hope, and you have given me back my strength to keep going." In the quiet, emotional stillness that followed the ruling, with the wind still pressing against the windows, Jack felt the inner storm begin to settle into unbreakable resolve. His remorse would no longer paralyze him. The paternal love and responsibility he felt for Lily and the entire family had become his true north. Rivals might still circle with tense street confrontations, and bureaucratic hurdles might continue to test them, but the bond forged through crisis had grown stronger than any empire. Emily stepped closer, her thin hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. In that moment, the vast gap between poverty and power felt both immense and miraculously bridged by compassion and protection. A destitute mother who had endured cold nights and humiliating hunger now stood beside a powerful man whose own heart had been healed by the children he had chosen to rescue. Justice had been served in the courtroom, but the deeper resolution was happening here in the quiet gathering of a new chosen family, where love and loyalty were measured not by blood or money, but by the willingness to stand together against every unfair wind that tried to tear them apart. The day ended with the children laughing softly over a simple meal, their voices filling the safe house with light. Jack looked at them, his remorse easing into purpose, his heart finally finding the peace it had long been seeking. The October 2025 evening wrapped the Northside safe house in a deceptive calm. The wind outside had softened, but it still pressed against the windows like a distant warning. Inside, the warm lights and soft furnishings highlighted the vast, painful disparity that continued to define their lives. Emily Harper moved through the living room with quiet, exhausted grace. At 31, she remained painfully thin and malnourished, her frame, worn down by months of hunger and sleepless nights spent curled around her 4 children to shield them from the freezing wind that had once howled through the crumbling apartment. The simple sweater she wore hung loosely on her shoulders, a humiliating reminder of how recently she had owned almost nothing. Jack Harlan stood near the kitchen counter, his powerful build casting a long shadow. At 44, the fair-skinned man still commanded respect across Chicago's construction empires and waste management networks. His wealth evident in the quiet security of the safe house and the resources he had, mobilized to protect the family. Yet the monitoring device on his ankle felt heavier than ever. His heart was a battlefield of escalating inner torment. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with fierce protective intensity that now embraced all 4 children and extended deeply to Emily as their steadfast mother. This love clashed violently with the gnawing remorse that had grown sharper since learning Lily was his biological daughter. He had escaped desperate poverty through power and deals, only to discover his own child had endured the same cold, hungry existence. The violent emotional conflict left him raw and disoriented his remorse, tearing at him with increasing force. The children were gathered around the table, finishing a simple meal. Lily, 7 years old, still wore her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap, her small face bright with the first real hope she had known in months. Tommy 8 sat close to her, his earlier distrust replaced by quiet acceptance. Sophie and Noah laughed softly as they shared crayons, their tiny bodies finally relaxing in the warmth. The first sign of returning danger came without warning. A sharp knock sounded at the door. Jack tensed immediately. Through the security camera, he saw a delivery driver holding a package. Something felt wrong. As the door opened under careful supervision, the man suddenly dropped the box and stepped back. 2 figures emerged from the shadows of the hallway, men connected to Jack's longtime underboss, the very lieutenant he had trusted for years. The shocking twist unfolded in a tense, bold, street-style confrontation right at the threshold of the safe house. The lead man spoke in a low, menacing voice. "Harlan, you've been played. Sophia wasn't working alone. Your underboss has been feeding information to rivals for months, using the arrest to weaken you and take control. He planted much of the evidence against you. And now he knows about the girl, your daughter. He sees her as a threat to his claim on the Empire. We were sent to make sure there are no loose ends." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Jack's world tilted. Extreme psychological shock flooded him, a numbing disorientation that made his powerful frame sway for a moment. The inner tearing exploded with violent intensity. His most trusted lieutenant, the man who had stood beside him through years of building the Empire, had betrayed him from within. The remorse that had gnawed at him now mixed with consuming rage and horror. He had brought danger directly to Lily and the children by trusting the wrong people. The paternal love surging through him for his daughter burned hotter, passionate, and fierce, clashing violently with the guilt that threatened to drown him. He had once been the poor boy on the street. Now his own blood was targeted because of the world he had built. Emily froze in the doorway to the living room. Horror and anxiety tore through her violently. She pulled the children behind her, her thin body trembling. Dizziness and numbness overwhelmed her, causing her to lose balance and grab the wall for support. Pain flared in her empty stomach, a humiliating reminder of her long months of powerless suffering. Her voice came out soft, timid, and polite, even in terror. "Please, the children. They have nothing to do with any of this." The intruders hesitated, but the threat hung heavy. One of them glanced at Lily, who clutched her cub's cap tightly, her wide eyes filled with fear. The confrontation remained tense, and controlled words and presence used as weapons rather than physical force, yet the danger was unmistakable. Jack positioned himself firmly between the men and the family, his voice low and commanding. "You tell the underboss this ends now. The family is under my protection. Any move against them is a move against me." The men exchanged glances and retreated into the hallway, the package left behind as a silent warning. The door closed, but the suspense lingered like smoke. The shocking twist had escalated everything. The hidden threat had returned from within Jack's own circle, making the betrayal deeper and more personal. In the quiet, condensed, emotional stillness that followed, chaos erupted inside Jack's heart. Remorse gnawed at him with savage force. He had escaped poverty only to build a world that now endangered the very child he had unknowingly left behind. The mindset of a man who had suddenly become the protector of his own vulnerable daughter left him psychologically shattered. Violent inner conflict raged, guilt over past trusts and choices, mixing with a fierce, burning determination to shield Lily and the others at all costs. Emily sank into a chair, her thin hands shaking. Shock and confusion swirled numbingly inside her. She had gone from desperate suspicion to overwhelming, passionate trust in Jack. Now that trust was being tested by dangers she could barely comprehend. The absurdity of the situation tore at her violently, a destitute, powerless mother, who had endured cold winds and humiliating hunger, now caught in the crossfire of powerful men's betrayals. Tears slipped down her cheeks as dizziness returned. "Why do they want to hurt us?" she whispered. "We have done nothing except try to survive." Lily, sensing the tension, climbed into Jack's lap. The 7-year-old pressed her small hand against his chest, as if trying to steady the storm inside him. "It's okay," she said softly. "You protected us before. We can be strong together." Her innocent kindness struck Jack like a lifeline. The paternal love he felt for her exploded with overwhelming intensity, healing and fierce at once. In that moment, the little girl he had rescued became the one offering comfort, her pure heart reaching the deepest wounds of a powerful man burdened by remorse and betrayal. Tommy stood close, his voice quiet but firm after his earlier turning point. "We won't let them take you away either. You're part of us now." Sophie and Noah crawled closer, their tiny hands clutching at Jack's sleeves. The 4 children formed a small circle of warmth and trust around the man who had become their shield. Emily watched her heart violently torn apart and slowly being pieced back together. The attachment she felt toward Jack burned with intense, passionate depth. She had been desperately poor and powerless for so long. Suddenly, a wealthy, powerful man was risking everything to protect them, even as his own world crumbled from within. Another unreasonable and unjust event struck shortly after. A late-night message from Jack's lawyer revealed that the underboss had already moved to freeze certain legitimate business accounts, claiming irregularities tied to the ongoing case. This threatened the immediate housing and support Jack had arranged for the family. The system, influenced by hidden hands, seemed determined to strip away their fragile stability once again. Emily felt the news like a physical blow. Humiliation and despair flooded her. She had endured too many cold nights and empty plates, only to face new barriers when safety was finally within reach. Her voice trembled as she spoke softly. "We will manage. Somehow. The children cannot go back to the cold." Jack's inner storm reached new heights. The violent conflict inside him, remorse, rage, and fierce paternal love, tore at him with numbing force. He had built an empire through trust and power, only to watch it turn against the family he now cherished more than any fortune. In the condensed emotional stillness, with the children gathered around him, and Emily watching with quiet strength, Jack made a silent vow. He would cut ties with the old world. He would protect them no matter the cost. The hidden threat had returned with shocking force, exposing layers of betrayal that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Yet in the heart of the crisis, the innocent kindness of a little girl and the quiet resilience of her family had become the light cutting through Jack's darkness. The powerful man, once lost in his own empire, was being healed and redefined by the very vulnerable souls he had chosen to rescue. Outside, the wind picked up again, but inside the safe house, a different kind of strength was forming. One forged in trust, protection, and the unbreakable bond between a powerful father figure and the children who had begun to save him in return. The October 2025 night deepened around the north side safe house, the wind outside rising again in restless gusts that rattled the windows like impatient fingers. Inside, the warm lights cast long shadows across the modest rooms, highlighting the stark, painful disparity that still defined their fragile new reality. Emily Harper sat on the edge of the couch, her thin, malnourished frame hunched with exhaustion. At 31, she remained a living portrait of long-suffering cheeks, hollow from months of hunger. Arms marked by sleepless nights spent shielding her 4 children from the freezing wind that had once howled through the cracks of their evicted apartment. Her simple clothes hung loosely on her frail body, a humiliating reminder of how recently she had possessed almost nothing. Jack Harlan stood by the window, his powerful silhouette framed against the city lights. At 44, the fair-skinned man still carried the quiet authority of someone whose construction empires and waste management networks represented wealth most could never imagine. Yet the monitoring device on his ankle and the fresh betrayal from his underboss weighed on him like chains. His heart was in the grip of the most violent inner torment yet. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned with overwhelming, passionate intensity, now embracing all 4 children and extending deeply to Emily as their resilient mother. This love clashed ferociously with the gnawing remorse that tore at him without mercy. He had escaped desperate poverty through power and calculated choices, only to learn that his own daughter had endured the same cold, hungry nights he once knew. The shocking revelation of his underboss's betrayal had pushed the conflict to breaking point, guilt over past trusts mixing with consuming rage and a fierce determination to protect what mattered most. The children were gathered close. Lily, 7 years old, sat curled against Jack's side, still clutching her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap like a talisman. Tommy, 8, stayed near his trust now, solid after his emotional turning point. Sophie and Noah leaned sleepily against Emily, their small bodies finally warm, but still carrying the memory of too many uncertain days. The drama escalated without warning. A sudden alert from the security system flashed across Jack's phone. Another dark vehicle had pulled up outside, men sent by the underboss, Boulder, this time. The confrontation unfolded in the street below in a tense, unexpected standoff. The rival group stepped out their leader, calling up toward the window in a loud, taunting voice. "Harlan, your underboss sends his regards. He wants the girl dealt with quietly. No loose ends. Hand her over and we walk away. Keep playing father and this whole thing ends badly for everyone." The threat was direct and chilling. Jack's body tensed, extreme psychological shock flooding him with numbing force. He swayed slightly, dizziness gripping him as the full weight of the betrayal crashed down. His most trusted lieutenant had not only framed him, but had targeted Lily, his own flesh and blood, as a threat to his power grab. The inner tearing became almost unbearable, a violent emotional storm that left Jack raw and disoriented. Remorse gnawed at him with savage intensity. He had built an empire that now turned its teeth on the innocent child he had unknowingly abandoned to poverty. The paternal love surging through him for Lily exploded into something primal and fierce, clashing violently with the guilt that threatened to drown him. He had once been the poor, powerless boy on the street. Now he stood as the powerful man fighting to protect his daughter from the very world he had helped create. Emily rose quickly, horror and anxiety tearing through her violently. She gathered the children behind her, her thin legs nearly buckling as dizziness and numbness overwhelmed her. Pain shot through her empty stomach, a humiliating echo of the many nights she had gone without food so her children could eat. She felt deep disorientation, the world spinning as the danger pressed closer. Her voice came out soft, timid, and polite even in terror. "Please. They are only children. They have suffered enough cold and hunger. Do not bring this darkness to them." In the chaos of the moment, as Jack moved to shield the family at the window, Lily slipped from the couch and ran forward. The 7-year-old planted herself between Jack and the line of sight to the street, her small voice ringing out with surprising strength. "He's my dad. You can't take him. He protects us." Her brave words froze the tense confrontation below. The rivals hesitated, the bold threat momentarily broken by the innocent courage of a child. Jack felt his heart shatter and mend in the same instant. The paternal love he felt for Lily burned brighter than any empire he had ever built. In that condensed emotional stillness, with danger lingering just outside, Lily's small hand reached up and pressed against the small cut on Jack's hand from the earlier chaos. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "We can be strong together. You don't have to be strong all the time." The simple gesture from the vulnerable child he had rescued struck Jack with extreme psychological shock. He who had clawed his way from poverty through ruthless strength was now being comforted and healed by the innocent kindness of his own daughter. Tears stung his eyes as the violent inner conflict reached its peak, gnawing remorse over years of absence and wrong choices, mixing with a fierce burning resolve to become the father she deserved. The mindset of a man who had once been desperately poor and was now suddenly loved and needed by the very child he had failed to protect left him emotionally shattered and reborn in the same moment. The rivals eventually retreated into their vehicle, after a final tense exchange of words. The threat diffused for the night, but far from gone. The safe house fell into heavy silence once more. Later in the quiet hours of recovery, Jack sat on the edge of the bed in the dimly lit room, his powerful frame slumped with exhaustion. The children had finally fallen asleep, but Lily refused to leave his side. She crawled into his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck as she sang the simple lullaby, "You Are My Sunshine," in her soft, sweet voice, the same song her late mother had sung on the coldest nights. Tommy joined quietly, sharing stories of their hard life on the South Side, revealing the deeper truths of disadvantaged children who had known only broken promises and hunger. Sophie and Noah added their innocent drawings, small get-well cards for the man who had become their protector. Emily watched from the doorway, her heart violently torn apart and slowly healing. The overwhelming attachment she felt toward Jack burned with intense, passionate depth. She had gone from desperate suspicion and fear to a trust so profound it left her dizzy with wonder. Her voice came out soft and filled with quiet emotion. "They are healing you, the way only children can, and you are giving them the safety I could never provide alone." Jack broke down then, the first time in decades. Tears fell as he confessed the weight of his past, the deals, the isolation, the man he had stopped believing he could be. The remorse that had gnawed at him for so long finally met its match in the innocent kindness of the children, especially Lily. In a raw, emotional, hospital-like stillness within the safe house, he realized the shocking final layer: the underboss had targeted Lily years earlier through hidden channels, making her survival and sudden presence in his life a literal miracle that forced him to choose between empire and lawn. Family. With Lily still in his arms, Jack made the decision that would redefine everything. He would fully accept her and all 4 children as his own. He would publicly claim Lily as his daughter, leave the shadows of the old world behind, and raise them with the protection and love they deserved. The paternal bond forged through crisis and healed through their kindness became unbreakable. Emily felt the moment deeply. The destitute mother, who had endured so many cold, wind-filled nights and humiliating poverty, now witnessed a powerful man choosing compassion over power. Confusion and profound gratitude left her disoriented yet filled with burning trust. The absurdity of their journey evoked quiet tears, her thin, exhausted frame beside the wealthy man whose heart had been mended by the very children she had fought to keep alive. In the condensed emotional stillness of that night, with the wind still pressing against the windows, Jack held Lily close and whispered, "You are my daughter. All of you are my family now. I will protect you with everything I have." The climactic healing had come not through wealth or power, but through the innocent hearts of 4 children, who had unknowingly saved the powerful man who had chosen to rescue them. The inner storms, though still present, had begun to quiet, replaced by a fierce paternal resolve that would carry them into whatever tomorrow brought. The wind off Lake Michigan still carried its familiar bite in the autumn air, but now it brushed gently against the windows of a modest suburban home on the quieter edge of the city. The backyard held a simple baseball diamond where the children played, and a pickup truck sat in the driveway, symbols of an ordinary American life Jack Harlan had deliberately chosen. He no longer moved through the shadows of his old world. The construction empire remained, but only the legitimate side run with clean hands and honest work. The wealth was still there, displayed now, not in penthouses or hidden deals, but in the quiet security it provided for the family he had chosen to protect. Emily Harper stood in the kitchen on this Saturday morning, the smell of pancakes and cinnamon coffee filling the warm space. At 33, she was no longer the painfully thin, malnourished woman who had once endured months of hunger and sleepless nights, huddled against the cold wind with her 4 children. Her cheeks had filled with health, her eyes bright with the peace that came from stability. Yet she still carried the quiet grace of someone who remembered every humiliating moment of poverty, the nights when dizziness and numbness had nearly caused her to collapse, the days when she had gone without food so her children could eat. She moved with soft, polite care, her voice gentle when she spoke to Jack, the man who had once been a stranger and was now the steady center of their world. Jack sat at the head of the table, his powerful frame relaxed in a simple flannel shirt. At 46, the fair-skinned man had stepped away from the old life completely. His wealth showed in the comfortable home, the reliable pickup truck, and the ability to give the children opportunities he had never known. Yet the deepest change was inside him. The paternal love he felt for Lily had grown into a profound, burning force that embraced all 4 children and extended to Emily with deep respect and compassion. This love had healed the violent inner torment that once tore at him, the gnawing remorse over years of absence, and the choices that had nearly cost him everything. The mindset of a man who had once been desperately poor, suddenly surrounded by the love and trust of a family he had rescued, had transformed him. Wealth and poverty could not separate genuine compassion, nor could they diminish the bond that transcended skin color or background. Love, he had learned, was colorblind and stronger than any divide. Lily, now 9 years old, stood on a stool stirring pancake batter with both hands, her faded Chicago Cubs baseball cap still perched on her head. She laughed as chocolate chips scattered across the counter. Tommy, 10 years old, helped flip the pancakes, his earlier guarded suspicion, long replaced by open affection. Sophie and Noah, now 7 and 5, added toppings with sticky fingers, their joyful voices filling the kitchen. The scene was one of quiet, condensed, emotional stillness, a family gathered not by blood alone, but by choice, protection, and the healing power of kindness. Jack watched them, his heart full. The inner tearing that had once raged so violently had softened into grateful peace, though echoes of remorse still surfaced in quiet moments, reminding him of the long road they had traveled. He remembered the absurdly unfair events that had befallen Emily, the eviction in the cold, the bureaucratic delays, the threats from rivals, intense street confrontations that had tested every limit. He remembered her soft, timid voice when she had been desperate and powerless, her moments of dizziness and deep disorientation when the weight of poverty felt crushing. And he remembered how her quiet strength, alongside the children's innocent compassion, had healed the wounds he carried from his old life. In every shared meal and backyard game, there was a life lesson about the true meaning of family. One lesson stood out clearly. Real knowledge comes not from power or money, but from opening your heart to those the world overlooks. Another lesson echoed in the way Lily's kindness had mended his spirit, teaching that true education begins when we allow the vulnerable to teach us compassion. A further lesson revealed itself in Tommy's journey from distrust to trust, showing that genuine understanding grows when we choose protection over pride. Yet another lesson shone through Emily's resilience, reminding everyone that the greatest education is learning to value love regardless of skin color or past circumstances. And the final lesson rested in Jack's transformation, proving that lasting knowledge arrives when wealth meets humility and poverty meets dignity, creating bonds no force can break. The morning unfolded with simple joys. Jack helped the children set the table, his large hands gentle beside their small ones. Emily smiled softly, her voice polite and warm when she thanked him for the fresh oranges he had brought from the market. The disparity between their beginnings remained a quiet memory, her once pitiful, humiliating poverty against his increasing displays of thoughtful provision, yet it no longer divided them. Instead, it deepened their shared appreciation for every moment of peace. As they sat together eating pancakes, laughter rising around the table, Jack looked at each face and felt the last remnants of his old inner conflict dissolve. The powerful man who had once commanded empires now found his greatest success in this ordinary kitchen. He had learned that compassion could bridge any gap, that love transcended skin color, and that true family was built through protection and kindness rather than blood or fortune. In the quiet, emotional stillness of that breakfast, with sunlight streaming through the window and the children's sticky hands reaching for seconds, the story offered one more gentle reminder. Every situation carried its own life lesson, the importance of choosing humanity in moments of crisis, the value of knowledge gained through empathy, and the quiet education found in everyday acts of care. Another lesson whispered through their journey: real growth comes when we release old remorse and embrace new beginnings. A further lesson emerged in their blended family, showing how love and compassion can heal even the deepest wounds. And the final lesson rested in the simple truth that no amount of wealth or poverty can separate hearts that choose to care for one another. Jack raised his coffee cup in a quiet toast. "To family," he said softly. The children echoed him with bright voices. Emily's eyes met his with deep gratitude, her once fearful heart now filled with overwhelming trust and attachment. As the morning continued, the family prepared for a trip to a local park, the pickup truck loaded with snacks and baseball gloves. The children ran ahead, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. Jack walked beside Emily, the two sharing a quiet conversation about the road they had traveled. In every step, the humanistic values shone through: the lesson of resilience, the education of forgiveness, and the knowledge that compassion creates lasting change. To everyone watching this video, may you enjoy good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining this story of redemption and chosen family. If this tale moved you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with others, so we can bring many more engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? How does it connect to real life in your own heart? Please share your comments below. The creator reads every one and listens deeply to the emotions from within your hearts. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.